Excellencies, dear colleagues, dear friends, my name is Nicolas Bras, and I am the head of the Global Compact on Refugees Coordination Team at UNHCR, the UN Refugee Agency. It is my great pleasure to welcome you to this virtual side event being held as part of the program of the Summit of the Future. We have an exciting, diverse, and multi-stakeholder panel, which will be introduced to you shortly. But first, allow me to say a few words of introduction on the summit itself, which is what has brought us together today. The Summit of the Future is being convened by the UN Secretary General to accelerate efforts to meet existing international commitments and take concrete steps to respond to emerging challenges and opportunities. As a result of this process, member states and partners will present a consensus-driven pact for the future, which, as you may know, has been in the process of drafting for some time now. And this will be accompanied by a global digital compact and a declaration on future generation as annexes. The pact is intended to be action-oriented, with chapters on sustainable development and financing, international peace and security, science, technology and innovation, and digital cooperation, youth and future generations, as well as transforming global governance. We are delighted that our event was selected to be part of the summit to demonstrate the mutual reinforcement of the Pact for the Future and the Global Compact on Refugees, and highlight key pledges made at the Global Refugee Forum last December that advance the actions of the Pact. Translation for the event will be available in English, French, and Spanish. Please select your preferred language by using the interpretation button in Zoom. I would now like to invite our moderator, UNHCR Assistant High Commissioner for Protection, Mrs. Ruvendrini Menikdiwala, to give her opening remarks and kick off the event. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Nicolas. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, I would like to echo Nicolas's warm welcome to all of you. Good afternoon, good morning, or good evening, depending on which time zone you are in. A very warm welcome to all of you for attending this virtual event, which is, as Nicolas has said, part of this program of this historic Summit of the Future. Also, my really heartfelt thanks to Colombia and Canada for co-sponsoring this event. I think it's a very clear illustration of the long-standing and steadfast commitment, not just to the International Refugee Protection Framework, but also to the Global Compact on Refugees. Also, my thanks to the very, very eminent lineup of speakers that we have today. I will be introducing them very shortly, but just to say that they do represent the whole of society approach, as you will see very shortly. Now, before I hand the floor over to the speakers, I just wanted to provide a few comments to set, if you like, the scene or to frame this event. One of the things that I have heard very frequently, both in my current function in Geneva, but also in my previous function as the head of the UNHCR office in New York, was complaints from many people concerning the multiplicity of processes on a plethora of themes, whether it was on conflict, on climate change, on gender inequality, on food insecurity, on access to water. There were lots of processes, but with very little or tangible outcomes. And this clearly does entail the risk of an erosion of confidence in multilateral processes, and certainly lack of confidence or belief in common and sustainable solutions, including, and very importantly, on issues relating to forced displacement. Now, I think the Summit of the Future and the Pact of the Future do provide a unique opportunity to address these concerns head on. This event, I hope, will demonstrate how the Pact of the Future and the Global Compact on Refugees reinforce each other and complement each other in terms of bringing common solutions to the vexed questions of forced displacement. Now, the Pact, as Nicolas has said, already contains some language on forced displacement in its current iteration. We know that the Pact is being hotly negotiated in New York, even as we speak, but we are counting on the member states that have signed on to this side event to continue to lobby for and to support the retention of the language in the Pact that is already there in the final version, which we hope will be adopted by the General Assembly in the coming days. Now, the pact does refer very specifically to the need to address the root causes of forced displacement, to facilitate access to durable solutions for refugees, for IDPs, and for stateless persons, including through equitable burden and responsibility sharing. It also calls for full support to host communities and for the full respect for the principle of non-refoulement. Now, how can the Global Compact on Refugees and the Global Refugee Forum, what can these two, the framework and the instrument, offer to the Pact of the Future? First of all, I think what it does, what these two, the instrument and the framework actually provide are really the sort of establishing the whole of society approach, which is actually pioneered by the GCR, and which should and could be a precedent for international coordination in order to achieve the Pact's ambitions and objectives. Also, the multi-stakeholder pledge framework, which was launched in the Global Refugee Forum last year, offers a model to make the whole of society approach a reality. Under this framework, member states, civil society, academia, private sector, the refugees themselves, UN agencies, international and regional financial institutions, faith-based organizations, municipalities, and different stakeholders, I think almost 16 different categories of stakeholders in all, made clear, tangible, and measurable commitments to advance refugee protection and solutions for the refugee problems, for the benefit not just of the refugees, but also for the communities that host them, thereby leading us, we hope, closer to the vision of the future that will be discussed in New York over the coming weeks. So I hope this event will further clarify that and also bring us a bit closer to how we can contribute to making sure that the Pact of the Future is a reality and not just words on paper. Now, I know you did not come to hear me speak, but I do hope that today's event will build on the very powerful momentum of the December 2023 Global Refugee Forum, which aims to show how we can harness its modalities and its pledges to address the objectives of the Pact. With that, I would like to invite our keynote speaker, Ms. Monica Malik, to take the floor. And I have to say, despite her young age, she has the most impressive credentials I have seen. Ms. Malik is a Dafi Scholar. She's the president of the University of Nairobi Students Association, and she is a youth representative speaking at the Summit of the Future opening ceremony. Ms. Malik fled South Sudan to Kenya, where she resided in the Kakuma refugee camp. So she has lived experience of forced displacement and certainly is a far better place than many of us to speak about her experiences. Ms. Malik, you have the floor.
Hi. I stand before you today not only as a Dafi Scholar and the president of the University of Nairobi Students Association, but as a young refugee with a lived experience of displacement. My journey is one of many shared by millions of refugees, youth around the world, who, despite the circumstances, we find ourselves in continued stride for better lives, a meaningful education, and opportunities to make a positive difference. Access to higher education has been pivotal in transforming my life and the lives of many young refugees. It provides more than just knowledge. It is the pathway to self-reliance, stability, and hope for a future where we can contribute to both our host communities and our countries of origin. However, for many refugees youth, this access remains a dream rather than a reality. The barriers we face are significant: legal restrictions, financial limitations, and sometimes even the lack of recognition for our skills and qualifications. That's why initiatives like the Global Compact on Refugees and the 15 by 30 target, which aims to increase refugee enrollment in higher education to 15% by 2030, are so crucial. Today, that figure stands at just 7%, a stark reminder of how much more needs to be done. Through scholarships like the Dafi program and partnership with universities, organizations, and governments, we are starting to see real progress. These initiatives not only open doors to education, but also the bridge needed for refugee youth to transition from learning to earning. But higher education alone is not just enough. We must also ensure that young refugees have access to dignified employment opportunities. In my role as a youth advocate, I have seen firsthand how equipping young people with the skills they need, whether through empowerment and self-reliance, the prospect of partnership between UNHCR, the Netherlands, and the organization like UNICEF and ILO is a brilliant example of what can be achieved when we align our efforts towards this goal. The prospects refugee youth are gaining access to development programs, internships, job placement that are helping to break the cycle of dependency. These efforts must be scaled up and replicated across other regions, and providing pathways to meaningful employment. Companies can unlock the potential of young refugees, allowing them to contribute to the economy and build sustainable futures for themselves and their communities. Lastly, I would like to emphasize the importance of supporting refugee-led initiatives. Refugee youth know our challenges best, and we are best placed to come up with innovative solutions to address them. Networks like the Global Refugee Youth Network and Tertiary Refugee Student Network are empowering young leaders to drive change from within. Through platforms like the Refugee Youth Leadership and Advocacy Training Programs, refugee youth are being equipped with the tools and confidence to engage in international dialogues like the one we are having today. In conclusion, we are to achieve the goals set forth by the Pact for the Future, we must work together. Governments, NGOs, the private sector, and refugee communities must collaborate to ensure that young refugees are included in global efforts to support youth. This is not just about education or employment. It is about recognizing the leadership and potential of young refugees as agents of change in their own right way. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Walid, not just for being a really compelling example of what young refugees can achieve if they're provided with the appropriate tools, but also for highlighting really access to education and higher learning as being vital if we are to ensure that refugees have a future, and also the importance of partnership and what it can achieve if we all work together to achieve these ambitions and to ensure access to proper services to refugees. And also for highlighting really the meaningful participation of refugees with really that mantra, nothing about us without us, and also saying, of course, that refugees are not just participants, but are actually leaders and agents of change. So thank you very much for that. With that, I will now turn to a very distinguished list of panelists. These are all partners who are leading on the multi-stakeholder pledges and are contributing to advancing the objectives of the Global Compact of Refugees. So I would address them in the order in which they will speak. We have Dr. Carlos Martin Beristain, who is a member of the Truth Commission of Colombia. Dr. Beristain has been an advisor to several truth commissions in Peru, Paraguay, and Ecuador. He has also previously worked at the Inter-American Court of Human Rights and as an advisor to victims in several cases before the International Criminal Court. He also has many, many other achievements to his name, but I will stop there. Suffice it to say that we warmly welcome Dr. Beristain to the panel. Next, we have His Excellency Mr. Gustavo Gallon, who's the Ambassador and Permanent Representative of the Permanent Mission of Colombia in Geneva. Mr. Gallon has more than 30 years of experience as a human rights defender and a university professor on public law and human rights. He also was the fourth independent expert of the Human Rights Council on the situation of human rights in Haiti. And he founded the Colombian Commission of Jurists in 1988 and has been its director since then. Mr. Ambassador Gallon, we warmly welcome you to the panel as well. Third, we have Ms. Fatia Alwan, who's the Director for Health and Social Development at the Intergovernmental Authority on Development, IGAD. She was previously a Program Manager for Health and Social Development of IGAD. And in her current role, Ms. Salvan works on the nexus of health, displacement, and social protection in the Horn of Africa. Ms. Salvan, welcome. Then we have Ms. Anila Noor, who is the founder of New Women Connectors and spokesperson of the Action Network on Forced Displacement. Ms. Noor is a policy scholar and consultant based in the Netherlands, examining social justice perspectives on gender and conflict, as well as forced migration and refugee policies in Europe. She founded New Women Connectors, a movement striving for mainstreaming the unheard voices of migrant and refugee women living across Europe. And as a representative of different global and regional refugee-led organizations and initiatives, such as New Women Connectors, the Global Refugee-Led Network, and Global Independent Refugee Women Leaders, she has collaborated on reports and served on panels, including at the Refugee Studies Center at Oxford University and the Global Academic Interdisciplinary Network. Ms. Noor, you're warm welcomed as well. And last but certainly not least, we have Ms. Liz Fernando Souza, who's the Manager for Diversity, Equity and Inclusion for Accor Brazil. Ms. Souza holds a postgraduate degree in Administration and Negotiation from the FIA Business School and a bachelor's degree in Social Sciences from the University Estadual de Campinas. And she has previously worked in various roles at Itaú Unibanco, a Brazilian financial services company. Ms. Fernando Souza, you're welcome as well. I will now hand the floor to Dr. Baristan for his remarks. Dr. Baristan, you have the floor.
Okay. Thank you so much for the invitation to share the experience of the Colombian Truth Commission. I will be in Spanish, speaking Spanish. Thank you. La Comisión de la Verdad de Colombia ha sido parte
The Colombian Truth Commission has been part of the institutions created in the framework of the peace agreement with the FARC-EP, together with a special jurisdiction for peace. It was created together with a special jurisdiction for peace and the unit for the search for missing person. It had a 3-year mandate and presented its report in July 2022, which consists of a set of 11 volumes, including a message to society, gender, ethnicity, children, the history of the conflict, impact on victims, and of course, a specific volume on exile, as well as a volume of findings and recommendation that explains the factors of persistence of the armed conflict in Colombia. The Commission considered that there was a territory that we call the Colombia outside Colombia. In other words, people who had to leave Colombia for reasons of the armed conflict, from political opponents to social leaders, ethnic or peasant communities, whose way of life and territory became a military target. Judges, prosecutors, and justice operators persecuted for doing their job, women who resisted the recruitment of their children, victims of massacres or kidnapping, amongst many others. In other words, the entire armed conflict in its different periods. It can be seen from exile in all the armed paramilitary groups, but also the guerrillas and the state's own political military apparatus. Article 5, Chapter 2 of the Global Compact on Refugees states that it is necessary to ensure that populations affected by humanitarian emergencies receive the support they need. In the case of Colombia, the war has provoked a chronic humanitarian emergency, of which exile is an example. These people need to be taken into account in order to build peace. The Commission collected 2,050 testimonies from victims, witnesses and survivors of the war in 24 countries across the world through a participatory process with victims, organizations and support groups in different countries, thanks to whom this work based on trust could take place. In exile, we found many stories from Colombia that complemented what was being researched in the country. Many refugees left not only with the pain or the disruption of their lives, they also left with part of the history of different organizations and sectors. In addition, we documented the impact of exile, taking into account the different experiences of the victims and even the different statuses in the receiving countries, refugees, asylum seekers, people in similar situations, noting that this is a specific human rights violation. We also documented the impact of second generations that are forgotten, as well as the impact on the families left behind in Colombia in what we call internal exile. In a joint work with the UNHCR office in Panama, we pointed out that more than 1 million people have had to leave the country because of the war, which would be the second form of victimization after forced displacement. Some victims told us that they had to start all over again. They had to start from the ashes because there was nothing left. Or that to be a refugee is to convince the other that your truth is worth it. It also shows the impact of stereotypes, such as drug trafficking, or that Colombia has a democracy, and the story of refugees. We even took testimonies from people who left after the signing of the peace agreement, which shows that peace building is a process that needs support even today in Colombia. The Commission has contributed to making these victims visible and proposing policies for their recognition. We have held 2 international meetings for truth, which gave a voice in Colombia to their stories and their proposals, many of them using art as a form of communication. In its recommendations for the future, the Commission proposed recognition in the victims' law for refugees and exiles, as well as a program for humanitarian aid in the return and participation of exiles in the peace process, which is still being consolidated. Refugees have thus contributed to the construction of peace and has many lessons for Colombia on overcoming the vision of the enemy, international support, culture, peace, and democracy. We believe that the recognition of the refugee and exile population and their participation in the peace process, as it has been seen in Colombia, demonstrate a path and an experience that can be useful for other countries and conflicts. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much, Dr. Beristain, for really sharing your experiences as a member of the Truth Commission, and also highlighting really the importance of the testimonies and lived experiences of Colombians, both forced to flee their country, but also those who were internally displaced, and the importance of the testimonies in really furthering the cause of peace in Colombia. I think this is really a very valuable lesson that we all should learn from. With that, I would like to turn the floor to Ambassador Gallon for his remarks. Ambassador, you have the floor.
Muchas gracias, estimada Rubendrini. ¿Me escucha?
Thank you very much. Can you hear me?
Yes, we hear you.
Distinguidos panelistas, estimados colegas, damas y
Dear
caballeros,
colleagues and distinguished panelists, ladies and gentlemen and friends, I am very happy to be here with you, especially because I am sharing this panel with Carlos, who is a friend and who is also part of the Truth Commission. Through his work, he has inspired us to honor the victims of the Colombian armed conflict who live in exile in Switzerland. Also, as co-organizer of the Global Refugee Forum, we were able to talk about the conflict. It is an honor to take part in this event and to represent Colombia, so we can contribute to this compact? And how can we connect this to peace building, which is one of the main objectives of Gustavo Petro, the president of Colombia? Colombia has been witness of a very long armed conflict and understands how important it is to build a future, a peaceful future. Thanks to the different processes, including the Truth Commission's report and recommendations, the Colombian state has been gathering its national and international conflicts in order to avoid another conflict. Therefore, in this context, we were a co-host of the Global Refugee Forum. We worked with Egypt, Norway, and also the Peace Building Department of the United Nations, where we're going to lead the prevention of conflicts. For Colombia, we have had to leave the country as refugees, as exiles due to the conflict. And this illustrates our determination to recognize the state's ethical and political responsibility in the protection of their citizens. According to the Truth Commission, there are around 1 million people, Colombians, living in exile. They have left because they want a better life. Around 5,000 of them live in Switzerland. In order to meet our objectives, in Geneva, we have held 7 events where we have honored 24 Colombians. We have also recognized the international support we have received from Switzerland. Amongst the exile, the people living in exile, there are politicians, artists, human rights activists, as well as their families. There's even a judge and his wife who discovered fake positives. In other words, civilians who were murdered by soldiers to pretend they had been victims of the conflict. They are looking for justice. These events have been organized with consultants from the embassy. It is composed of Colombian refugees. Many international organizations have supported us, such as the UNHCR, as well as the WTO. We have also invited representatives from the international community, like diplomats from Spain, Argentina, Norway, and other countries, as well as civil society organizations. Some of them have participated in these events, representing those who have been honored. In each one of these events, over 200 people have participated. We have met at UNHCR's headquarters at the University of Geneva, as well as the Colombian residents here in Geneva. These events have allowed reconciliation and symbolic reparation, which is important in order to build sustainable peace in Colombia. At each one of these events, I have asked for forgiveness, and I have also recognized the state's responsibility for ignoring the fact that they had to leave the country, or because we were not able to protect them. Without a doubt, this is related to the compact for the future. We cannot have one without the other. It refers to the 3 pillars of the UN: sustainable development, peace and security, and human rights. In Colombia, we are moving forward in order to meet our pledge, in order to protect the future generations, as it is highlighted on the Pact for the Future. The events that we have done also come from the bottom of my heart. It is natural. Sometimes it surprises me. And it also shows my solidarity as well as my support of human rights. I would like to invite you all to join us virtually or in person to the next event, which will take place on the 27th of September at the residence of the Colombian ambassador. In other words, my house. Let's honor Colombian families that have been defending human rights, the social movement, and also artistic expression. I encourage you all to take advantage of this space and to join these collective efforts. I'm talking about the Pact for the Future and the Compact, the Global Compact Refugees. We need to face these challenges together. Thank you very much.
For really highlighting the experiences that Colombia has gone through in its efforts to achieve peace, but also in its efforts to ensure the trust of the communities that had left Colombia and who you have honored, including through events sponsored by you yourself personally, in order to be able to build trust and to ensure reconciliation, forgiveness, and reparation. And you have also highlighted the links, really, the experiences of Colombia and how they link to the Pact of the Future in order to avoid situations like that occurring, including references to sustainable development, peace, and security, and their importance as they are enshrined in the Pact as well. Thank you very much for your comments. I now turn to Ms. Alvan for her comments. Ms. Alvan, you have the floor.
Merci beaucoup, Madame la Commissaire adjointe.
Thank you very much to Madame Commissioner. I'm going to speak in French. This is an honor for me to actually be here in this meeting to talk about the promotion of the Global Compact on refugees, especially at the moment when we're actually facing challenges when it comes to displacement, especially because of the conflicts, but also because of the climate change and also the natural phenomena. Generally speaking, our contribution to the implementation of the Global Compact on Agriculture and the Compact on Future is on different levels. First of all, the sharing of responsibilities, just like it is mentioned in Objective 1, the idea it is to lighten the responsibility of the hosting countries. We know that the less advanced countries do have a very important responsibility to play when it comes to hosting the major part of the refugees. And in 2023, the medium-level countries have to host up to 75% of the refugees of people around the world. And they are also facing the climate change consequences. The 7 member states of IGAD are currently hosting more than 24 million displaced persons, which is 1/5 of the total population of displaced people around the world, and more than 70% of the displaced people on Africa. The consequences of climate change, more specifically, the catastrophe and the natural phenomenon also leads to displacement inside the countries and also beyond the national borders. We have migrations, we have also planned displacement and others. The most vulnerable people in the society are also the most affected by the climate change. Displaced people, like people who we call IDPs, internal displaced people, and also the people with no nationalities are affected because most of the time they don't have any security, also any assistance. Through the multi-party engagement framework that was discussed on the World Forum on Refugees in 2003, and also we have a lot of commitments that have been taken in this framework. So all these changes that I mentioned, all these commitments, are very important to also actually make progress on the objectives that we have established in Africa, and also the regional commitment of IGAD that is engaged to bring solution to the displaced populations, more specifically those affected by the negative aspects of climate change. So as a sub-region, IGAD is in favor of social protection, and also we are committed to support the countries that have been affected by this phenomenon. So, and because of that, because our countries, our member states are the most affected, they understand the commitment and what is at stake. So we need to also create the opportunities, inclusive opportunities, long-standing opportunities for these communities that are being affected. So the compact understands that the countries need funding in order to face the consequences of climate change, and also to be able to respond to their needs. We need to make sure that the funding is directed to the most vulnerable communities in the fragile context, and also the countries and the communities that are affected by the conflict. Through the commitment in favor of climate action, our sub-region IGAD is trying to make the promotion of new regional instruments, like, for example, Article 16 of the Free Movement Protocol that calls all the member states to facilitate the entry and staying also of people in displacement during or maybe after a natural phenomenon. And thirdly, we actually, by promoting the link, we have different platforms, like, for example, the platform in favor of support of IGAD, and also the member states. The member states were able to coordinate more specifically their response against difficult displacement by adopting an inclusive attitude towards those who lost their house. You also have regional processes. You have the adaptation plan, you have also the development strategy, and those need to be taken into account, because displacement is taken into account as a very important key element. So IGAD and its initiative are actually directly contributing to the objectives of this compact, especially, for example, the Declaration of Kampala. And also we have a political framework of IGAD on the protection of refugees, and also facilitation of trans-border movements. We also have the development of youth, which is a priority for us. So it is all about creating jobs, and also to build capacity so that the youth, even if they are refugees, can contribute to the economic growth of the countries. So what are the support elements? The most important for the countries that are hosting a huge volume of refugees. Number one, we have governmental leadership. we need support from the international community and also approaches that are going to take into account peace and also an integrated approach to actually respond to the needs of all the affected communities. So the Compact on Future needs to take into account the diversity of situations and the challenges that the countries are facing in a specific geographical area. Thank you very much.
Merci, Madame Alban, pour vos commentaires très précieux.
Thank you very much, Madam, for this comment that you just made, because you mentioned the fact that we have 24 million refugees in IGAD, which is a very high number, and also talked about the importance of climate action and also sharing of responsibility, because those are the countries that are the least advanced that are hosting the highest number of refugees, and the importance of multi-party commitment in order to bring solutions to this issue. And you also mentioned the initiatives of IGAD, more specifically the social protection, free movement of people and goods, and the importance of assistance towards development, not just humanitarian help or assistance, and also important criteria, for example, leadership, and also the support of international community in these initiatives. Thank you very much for this intervention.
Turn to Ms. Anila Noor for her comments. Ms. Noor, you have the floor.
Thank you so much. I'm honored to join this important discussion and presenting the multi-stakeholder pledge on gender equality and protection for gender-based violence, which represent a critical step forward. It is actually not our commitment to gender equality, but also a tangible way to advance the pact for the future. The pledge is aligned with the Action 8, the achievement of the gender equality, Action 19, accelerating commitment on women, peace and security, and then Action 34, improving gender equality in innovation, sends a powerful message. The involvement of refugees movement-led organization is a testament to the vital role women play in the shaping inclusive solution, because the risk of violence against women and girls increase in conflicts and are a major driver of the displacement. Gender-based violence risk also increase during displacement and are a threat to the more than 60 million forcefully displaced and stateless women and girls hosted primarily in the low and middle economy countries. One of the core objectives of gender equality and gender-based violence focus on ensuring displaced women and girls have access to the gender-based violence services and prevention, which is still too often not the case. We managed to mobilize more than 100 pledges, but there's still much more to do. In especially expanding our support to women refugee-led organizations on the forefront and ensuring every refugee woman and girl had access to the services which they need. But we can't stop at rhetoric. We are truly to advance gender equality. We must recognize the transformative potential the partnership between states, civil societies, and the RLOs offer. All pledges bring forward an opportunity to improve women's and girls' access to the comprehensive GBV prevention and response services. It is about creating real partnership with refugee, women-led and host communities partnership that aren't just for inclusion, but the solution tailored to their realities and their needs. Meaningful participation is a pillar we must center in all our efforts. Refugee women must not only be consulted, they must lead. As we know, those closest to the issue are often those closest to the solution. Their lived experience, our lived experience, and leadership are critical to addressing this protection and inclusion challenges we face. Gender equality isn't an isolated issue. It is central to the Pact for the Future and the broader 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. It is embedded in every action statement, and through the Gender Equality and Protection for GBV pledge, we can mainstream gender consideration across the entire response to the forced displacement. This is about resilience, empowerment, and breaking down the systematic barriers that have been kept women and girls marginalized till today. Now let's be clear. Co-designing with refugees and women-led organizations is the not option, is essential, as it is play a critical role in ensuring accountability, effectiveness, and the sustainability of our efforts. Through the whole of society approach, the Global Compact of Refugee, where we have seen the powerful impact of these voices at the table, including the GRF from 2023, but we must go further. For the Pact for the Future to achieve an ambitious goal, RLOs must not only be involved, but to co-lead. Lastly, in the words of the late Kenyan environmentalist Wangari Maathai, the higher you go, the fewer women there are. I want to encourage more women to climb up the ladder and to contribute to decision-making. End of the quote. We must ensure that refugee women not only climb the ladder, but be empowered to reshape it entirely through meaningful participation. Together, through participation, innovation, and relentless commitment to gender equality, we can make the pact for the future, not just for a promise, but a reality. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Ms. Noor, for your very valuable comments. You have highlighted the very critical issue of gender inequality and, of course, the whole issue of gender-based violence, which, as we know, is becoming more and more widespread, unfortunately, in practically every conflict and certainly in every region across the planet. You have particularly highlighted, of course, the situation in the low-income and middle-income countries and the particular difficulties there. And you have underlined that even though we have had over 100 pledges relating to GBV in the Global Refugee Fora, there's still a lot that needs to be done to move from words to actual actions on the ground. And in that, you have highlighted the importance of partnerships and solutions that are actually tailored to needs rather than what everybody thinks should be done. And critically, you have highlighted really the importance of the meaningful participation, but not just the participation, but the leadership of the women themselves. And I really like this quote that you use, those who are closest to the issue are also closest to the solution. And I will definitely use that in the future myself. And of course, you have underlined the whole of society approach as well. Thank you very much. And now we turn to our last speaker on the list, Ms. Fernanda Souza. Ms. Souza, you have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Ruandrini, for the warm introduction. And I'm really honored to be part in this meeting with you all in this panel. And I'm delighted to share my contribution from the perspective of the private sector, and more specifically addressing the tourism and hospitality industry. Accor is a French multinational company, stands as one of the largest leaders in Latin America with significant operations in key countries. We believe that our business should be driven by the vision of positive hospitality, aimed at giving back more to society and the environment while continuously elevating the standards of what defines sustainable hotel operations for the future. Globally, we have a long-standing commitment of over 20 years to the principles of the Global Compact among various other forums and alliances, such as 10 Partnership for Refugees. In the Americas, notably in Brazil, where we have a substantial presence, we are honored to be part of the group of mobilizing companies in the Companies with Refugees Forum, an initiative led by UNHCR and UN Global Compact in Brazil, in addition to other initiatives supporting LGBTI+ inclusion and combating violence against women. Our efforts remain focused on the fact that despite the initiatives of various Latin American states, their governments, and different international organizations, a significant inequality gap still exists, requiring the proactive engagement of the private sector. So, in 2022, we strengthened our collaboration with UNHCR in Brazil, initiating efforts to create conditions for our hotels to enhance the inclusion of refugees, thereby connecting them with our job opportunities. A commitment that we also reinforced at the Global Refugees Forum in the Global Pledge last year with the other companies from Companies with Refugees Forum. Accor Brazil pledged to hire 208 refugees from different nationalities by December 2027, and to offer hospitality training for 600 more, helping them restart their lives in Brazil. We trained our leaders and recruiters in partnership with the UNHCR and UN Women. We developed the best practices guide for the hiring of migrants and refugees. We established a training module in our hotels, which includes 4 hours of theoretical content covering the hospitality sector, the daily operations, the key departments, housekeeping and food and beverage, Brazilian labor legislation that is super important to include, and assistance in resume preparation. On the second day of the training, participants gain practical experience by shadowing a hotel employee. And we provide certificates and invite them to participate in our selection process for available positions. We are pleased to celebrate the inclusion of over 100 migrants and refugees in our teams in last year. Notably, we already have refugee employees from various nationalities, with the largest groups being Venezuelans and Haitians. And we're still working in this topic because it's really important to us. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Fernanda Souza, for really representing so ably the private sector on this panel and for highlighting really the importance of the work that Accor Brazil is doing, but also other private enterprises, but particularly Accor Brazil, and including refugees in your employment structures, but also in your training initiatives. I think we are extremely grateful for that, because it does, as you have highlighted, provide the refugees with the opportunities for self-reliance, but also, of course, contributing to the local economies in which they are and the local communities with which they reside. And I think that's really a very, very critical factor. So thank you very much for highlighting that for us. With that, we have closed the speakers on the panel, and I do want to thank all 5 of you for your really important contributions and remarks. We will now go to the discussion portion of the briefing. Unfortunately, we don't have a lot of time. We do have a registered list of speakers. We will go through them. And we also have questions that have been submitted to us in advance, and I do hope that we will have sufficient time to go through at least a few of them. I would like to start by asking the interventions from the interveners from the floor to please limit your comments to 2 minutes, so as to ensure that everybody does have an opportunity to speak, and also for some of the questions to be answered. I first call on Ms. Estelle Ferriot of the Permanent Mission of France in Geneva. Madame Ferriot, vous avez le floor.
Merci beaucoup, Madame la Haut-Commissaire assistante. Monsieur
Thank you very much, Madam. Ladies and gentlemen, France would like to thank Canada, Colombia, and the UNHCR for this meeting, as well as all the panelists. It is clear that this Global Compact on Refugees should, and also the Global Compact on the Future, should work together. And the World Forum was a very important step for us, and France is very proud to be part of this process. We have taken a lot of commitment in order to commit ourselves for the future, not only for the refugees, but also for the countries and the communities that are hosting them. And I'm thinking most specifically commitment in favor of climate change, in order to actually make and have a project to help refugees. We've invested, we think about investing 150 million over 4 years. So we need to actually also emphasize the fact that the new compacts are talking about gender equality. It's very important because women and also girls are the more exposed, and we know that they are the major element of change. So it's because, and also because of that we actually need to talk about protection and other elements. And I'm very proud to hear that we are talking about protection, because that is very important, because for things to change, we need to actually involve all the partners, and we are very proud to see that we can work with them. And there are a lot of member states and also international organizations and NGOs. The other important element is participation of refugees themselves, Madame Annie Lalou said it. And at this level. I would like to thank the UNHCR that gave me the opportunity a few weeks ago to attend some meetings with women that had refugee NGOs. And the question that I wanted to ask today is, what can we do so that these processes that are so complex become flexible and open in order to take into account all the stakeholders that are closer to the reality on the field. Thank you very much.
Thank you
very much for your comment and also for the question that you just asked when it comes to the GRF and also the summit for the future. And how this can actually help the objective of women that are on first line of action.
Je donne la parole à Monsieur Mohamed Al-Maloud Ag-Mohamedoun, qui nous rejoint depuis la Mauritanie.
We are giving the floor to Mr. Mohamed Al-Maloud.
Monsieur Ag-Mohamedoun, vous avez la parole.
Sir, you have the floor.
Je viens de recevoir une note en fait que
I've just received a message that Mr. Mamadou is not connected, so I'm going to give the floor to Mr. Xavier De Vito, advisor for genetic conflicts at the World Bank.
Many thanks, Madam Assistant High Commissioner. Many thanks for your invitation to this very important event. We were very impressed by listening to the speakers, and I also wanted to recognize here the efforts that are made daily by hosting countries. Like other speakers before us, we believe that Summit for the Future and the Global Compact on Refugees are intrinsically linked. We do hope to be able to contribute a development perspective to this global effort in line with the Global Compact, the Global Refugee Forum, but also the Action 2030 and the commitment to leave no one behind. And in this context, we are particularly appreciative of the references to the need to take a medium-term approach, a whole-of-government-led approach, focus on inclusion in labor markets, in national service delivery systems, obviously as appropriate in each circumstances, and then about the importance on responsibility sharing. This is only one element of the response, and partnership and cooperation within the context of the HDP Nexus are obviously critical. So with this, we hope to be able to contribute to this global effort and look forward to further engaging on these important issues. Many thanks.
Thank you, Mr. De Vito, for your comments and certainly for bringing in the role of the international financial institutions and the development perspective in relation to both the Pact of the Future, but also the Global Compact on Refugees. I would now like to call on Kari Diener, the Executive Director of the Refugee Self-Reliance Initiative.
Thank you very much. As one of the co-conveners of the Multi-Stakeholder Pledge on Economic Inclusion and Social Protection, I really appreciate the opportunity to hear about the many initiatives today and the great progress that's being made. One of the key themes emerging from our pledge group is the central role of local government and private sector stakeholders, including at the subnational level, in advancing the types of policy reform efforts that are really just so central to achieving self-reliance and shared prosperity for displaced populations and hosting communities. In East Africa, for example, we are seeing some really groundbreaking work coming out of the Kenyan government's Kakuma Kalabia Challenge Fund, which enables private sector investment with the goal of unlocking economic potential of refugees and their hosts. Another great example is the Melkadida Compact in the southeastern part of Ethiopia's Somali region, which aims to further the enabling environment and strengthen the capacity of local communities to contribute back to their local rural economy amidst very severe climate conditions. I'm very interested in hearing from our colleagues today, from the panelists, on other promising models that they're seeing of localized policy efforts and collaboration which support inclusive economic development and which could be uplifted to advance and operationalize the mutual goals of both the Pact and the Global Compact on Refugees. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Diener, certainly for highlighting the role of the local government and also providing positive examples in both Kenya and Ethiopia, and the question that you have directed to the panelists as well on localized policy efforts, which they're familiar with. I would now like to call on Monsieur Mohamed Al-Maled Mohammedoun depuis la Mauritanie. Monsieur Al-Maled, vous avez la parole.
Mr. Mohamed Malmedoun, you have the floor.
Unfortunately, it looks like we were really having connectivity issues with Mauritania, so we will have to, unfortunately, forward the intervention from Mr. Mohammedoun. We will now move to the questions, a round of questions that have been provided to us in advance. I will return to the panelists for that, but I do want to note that the Ambassador Gallon and Madame Alwan did have to leave early to attend other engagements. We thank them very much for their really significant participation in this event. I would like to now ask each of the panelists a few questions, starting with our keynote speaker, Ms. Malit. Ms. Malit, as a refugee youth advocate, how can the voices of refugee youth be further amplified through the Pact of the Future? And what role do you see for young leaders in shaping the future of global refugee protection and governance? Ms. Malit, you have the floor.
Thank you so much. And maybe if you could maybe pardon the question.
Sure. It's actually how, as a youth refugee advocate yourself, how you see the voices of refugee youth being further amplified through the Pact of the Future, and what role you would see for young leaders in shaping the future of global refugee protection and governance. I think you did respond to that partially in your keynote speech, but perhaps you want to elaborate a bit more on that.
Okay, thank you so much. And I think the very first thing that should be done to amplify their voices is offering education. And we can acknowledge that currently the education sector is facing a lot of challenges when it comes to funding, and this is by giving. This is by through sustainable. Okay, like.
Ms. Malit, I think we lost you. While we wait for Ms. Malit to perhaps rejoin us, perhaps you can move to the next speaker. Dr. Beristain, I have a question for you. Can you give us an idea of the challenges you faced as part of the Truth Commission in Colombia, and particularly your work in the context of the chapter on exile? How those lessons may inform the work following the Summit of the Future? Dr. Beristain, you have the floor.
Gracias por la pregunta.
Thank you very much for your question. Well, I think that one of the major challenges during this work has been to know how to work on a trust relationships, because exiled and refugees had to left the country because they were lacking protection from the state, and they did not have any humanitarian direct aid. They have to do with their own histories, their own stories, their own feelings, those leaving Colombia. And it was important to build the connections with their history and telling their histories, their stories, stories means reliving their own scenarios, their past scenarios. And this was to be taken into account by us because, you know, we have Colombians, refugees around the world. We in Colombia, we have also refugees from Venezuela, and many of them went also to the United States. And many people told us, we don't want to be the subject for a study, but we want to be part of a process. And this was their input, because many times refugees are the owners of their own reconstruction process. So they are not passive agents, they are active agents. And another challenge is how to establish a link between exile and their exile and Colombia, because for many years the Venezuelan state has not existed. So there is too much distortion about the Colombian reality. Many people think that those who left are living better, but we do know that this is not fully true. And part of the job of the commission was to document this inside and outside Colombia, so that all those experiences be heard of and also be submitted to the state, so that the Colombian state could consider exile as a violation of human rights, not only in terms of impact, but also in terms of citizenship, in terms of losing their own motherland and their lives as well. This has had a very heavy weight, trying to embed them in their own life processes, new life processes, so that they can participate in their new, in the construction of their present and their future. It does not only have to do with the political situation of the country. It has to do with human rights and humanitarian international law. And also in Colombia, the history of refugees should be taken into account to build the new story, the new history of Colombia, so that they will be given back a role in the Colombian reality. That started from the participation of victims on, but also this is a challenge underway, a challenge in progress. Now we have a mandate, we have a follow-up committee, and we have the will to implement the recommendations issued by the new administration. Those recommendations are key, and they should be taken into account, and refugees should also be taken into account for the construction of peace and security in Colombia. It is not only to deal with emergencies, it has to do also with reinserting those people in the reconstruction of peace in Colombia by including their potential, the lessons they learned in other countries, the embedding of those people in the new social fabric. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Beristain, for sharing your experiences and also drawing the parallel with the Venezuelan refugee situation that is currently existing here right now. I would now like to ask a question from Ms. Noor. Ms. Noor, can you speak on the importance of intersectionality and the age-gender diversity approach to achieving the goal of leaving no one behind, as set out in the 2030 agenda, and advise us on concrete ways that member states, development actors, the private sector, and other partners can ensure that they hold themselves accountable to this approach? including while implementing the GRF pledges? That's a bit of a long question, but this is very
important question. Thank you so much. Indeed, it's a very important question. And honestly, I'm telling you, with over 2 decades of my own experience and leadership in advocating for women's rights, refugee rights, gender equality, I can assure you that intersectionality is the fundamental to achieving the 2030 Agenda's goal of leaving no one behind. My journey as a refugee, as a woman, and through my intensive work with refugee and women-led organization has shown that people face multiple overlapping forms of discrimination based of age, based of gender, displacement status, their ethnicity, disabilities, and so on. So we can't compare one situation to other situation. We need to understand what is intersectionality and how we can use this approach, not to put other solution to other solution. We risk overlooking those who really need this the most. The age, gender, and diversity approach ensures that policy reflect these diverse needs. For example, if I say a young woman, she's displaced, but there's a man who's old, but he has a disability. So whom we're giving the focus, we can't use the same approach. We have to understand their unique challenges and require tailor-made solution, as I said earlier, to make it effective implementation of Global Refugee Forum pledges and to ensure accountability of intersectionality. What we need to do first, we need to collect detailed information data. We really need to gather, analyze the information broken down by age, gender, and other factors to see who is being left behind and what are the reasons still they are behind, why they are not there. This helps in developing target and effective policy. Second, promote meaningful participation. Meaningful participation is not our only approach for us. It's a method involving refugee, women, a different part of the youth, different disabled, stateless persons, and how we can understand that gender intersectionality when we are creating this crucial creation of the solution to understand the power dynamic and shift of making a true inclusion. And also for ensuring accountability, we really need a partnership. The private sector, the development sector, everyone should feel accountable to use meaningful participation, to use age, gender, and diversity. And we need to say no if we feel they are not using this thing. And we really need to have more trainings. We really need to trainings for the partners, for the private sector, so they can understand the intersectional and similar goes with the meaningful participation. And lastly, how we can make sure use meaningful participation to have established monitoring and reporting system, because systematic justice reflects how we can understand and come up more solution. So I think this is the main key, to have intersectional and accountable mechanism work together. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Ms. Noor, for underlining the importance of differentiated approaches depending on the specific needs of the refugees, the importance of data, and this is something that has been highlighted by several speakers, the importance of meaningful participation by the refugees themselves, and of course, all the measures that are needed to address some of the specific situations, including the importance of intersectionality. Thank you very much. Ms. Fernanda Souza, I also have a question for you. As a leading private sector actor, how can Accor support the objectives of the Global Compact, in particular refugee inclusion and providing sustainable opportunities for refugees? I think you partly answered that in your first intervention, but we would really be happy to hear you elaborate a little further on that. Thank you.
Thank you for the question. And to us, hospitality is about people. And Accor is committed to welcoming everyone, embracing and valuing difference, and promoting a culture of inclusion. Our group has a long-standing commitment to creating equal opportunities for all. We understand that offering employment to refugees is crucial for them to rebuild their lives. And this is a responsibility that the private sector is well positioned to fulfill. As a mobilizing company within the Companies with Refugees Forum, we are proud to set an example that encourages other companies in our sector and beyond to adopt similar practices. We are particularly committed to making our hospitality activities a true example of social mobility. We provide access to jobs and training opportunities for individuals from all backgrounds and create pathways for everyone to learn, grow professionally, and enhance their personal well-being. This year, we established a partnership with a hospitality school, and we will offer free courses in housekeeping, a waitstaff training to 70 migrants and refugees. These initiatives also support them to utilize these certificates to seek employment in other service sectors in Brazil, in their home country, but also in other countries, because the hospitality sector is expected to be one of the fastest growing industries in the next decade, offering numerous opportunities for career growth and development for talented individuals, including refugees. So it's our contribution in this cause. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Fernanda Souza. I think that really does provide, your comments really provide the importance of the private sector in achieving really concrete solutions for refugees, notably through inclusion and through systematic inclusion. And we do thank you for that. I think, unfortunately, Ms. Malit is still offline. We have not been able to connect with her, which is extremely unfortunate because I'm sure she would have been able to provide some valuable insight into how to amplify young refugee voices on the international stage. But with that, I think we have come to an end for the panel discussion, and including all the questions that, the round of questions that we received. I do want to thank all the panelists for their participation, for the incredibly thoughtful and reflective responses and interventions that they have made. And I also want to thank the interveners from the floor. I was told that I should be providing some concluding remarks, but honestly, I don't think I could even attempt to try and encapsulate all of the different important points that have been made by the panelists and certainly by the interventions from the floor as well. But suffice it to say, I think what we have seen is a wide variety of different perspectives and different views from different stakeholders. And this is why in my opening remarks, I did say this panel really has been a whole of society approach, because we have had the private sector, we have had the refugees, we have had government representatives, and we have had academics and eminent experts who have been working in the truth and reconciliation domains, who have been providing us with incredible insight into their daily work, the priorities that they have, the work that they have done to contribute towards both the GCR and the forthcoming Pact of the Future, and also the importance of working in partnership with all of these different stakeholders and to achieve the objectives, not just of the GCR, but also of the, we hope, soon to be adopted Pact of the Future. With that, I do want to thank all of you. It is almost 8 o'clock here in Europe. I know it's a little bit more of a civilized hour in New York and other time zones, but I want to thank you all for your patience and really for your interest and your enthusiasm in participating in this event. With that, I conclude this event by thanking all of you very, very much. Thank you and good night from Europe.